Hi, welcome to Basic AutoCAD, CAD 116. Today we're going to take a look at Chapter 6, Basic Drawing Setup from our AutoCAD 2022 textbook. So as we take a look at this, what we're looking at is the basic steps for setting up a drawing, how to start a drawing using a template, being able to use the specified units, being able to specify the drawing limits, working with snap and grid, working with layouts, and being able to set the scale in a layout in print. Okay, so I have AutoCAD open and I have our assignment number 2, our architectural drawing. I've also got our mechanical drawing here as well. And we're using the templates from D2L. And so this is a mechanical title block template. And we can get those templates under the content area. And then as we look at the drawing templates, all title blocks. And so we have our mechanical title block, we have our plate title block, and we have our architectural title block. And each of those title blocks is set up to create the drawings for that specific type of drawing. And so the units for the mechanical title block are set up in inches and decimal units, and the units in the architectural title block are set up in imperial units for feet and inches. As we go through and we take a look at the basic steps for setting up a drawing, and I realize this is a little bit small, but I think you'll be okay as far as being able to see this. What we want to do is be able to look at the units. And so, for example, here in my CAD system, I'm going to hide the menu bar, show the menu bar. I think it's best to have the menu bar on because we can get these different pull downs for the drawings. And if we go into Format and then we select Units, what you'll see is that the units for the mechanical drawing are set for decimal. And then if we take a look at the architectural drawing and we go under Format Units, we'll see that they're architectural. And they give you a sample output. Like this is 3 inches at an angle of 45 degrees would be a sample output for that. And so as we look at the different drawings and the different units, we'll be able to work with those. And then we'll look at being able to set up snap and the increment levels. And so typically on architectural drawings, we'll draw in model space. And you can see I have the grid and the snap here. If you have the grid and the snap enabled in the customize area here under grid, you can just toggle the grid component on right here or the snap right here. And you can also go into the settings right here. Another way to go into grid and snap is under tools, drafting settings. And I kind of prefer to go in it this way because it's old school. It's kind of got more information to offer us. And then if we look at the snap and the grid, we can enable it, or you can hit the F3 key. And typically on architectural drawings, I'll set up the snap spacing at 6 inches and the grid spacing at 12 inches. And what that will do is that will allow me, when I draw something, to snap to the grid in 6-inch units. So it goes 6, 12, 1 foot 6 inches, 2 feet. And then as we take a look at some of these other aspects, things like the LT scale is used to determine the line type scaling. And we'll come back to that at a different moment. If we look at the limits, if I type in limits, on the architectural drawings, we've got those set up to be starting in the lower left-hand corner at the user coordinate system 0, 0, and it's 0x, 0y, and then 0z. And then the upper right-hand corner is the size in real-world units of the drawing. And so the limits are set to 20 feet in the x-axis and 18 feet in the y-axis. If I wanted to make this slightly bigger, maybe 25 feet, I'd say 25 apostrophe, comma, 25 apostrophe, enter. And then you'll notice that the limits have increased and the drawing grid and snap within those limits has increased as well. Some of the startup options that we can work with for CAD would be under the templates. And so if we say File New, this is the default directory for templates. And the default is the AutoCAD template style. And so it just gives you a blank drawing and a blank layout. Actually gives you two layouts. Names the drawing. This one would be called Drawing 2 because I've already started one new drawing previously to this session. And so we're using the templates from D2L. And so as we look at these different templates, if I wanted to create a mechanical drawing, I could get the B-size mechanical template, which is labeled with a DWT file, and I can download that and I can open it. And so this is what's called paper space, and this is what's called a viewport. This is model space, and we create our drawings in model space to real-world units when we work with the mechanical or the architectural title block. And so as we go through different startup options, when we say new, it goes to the default directory for these templates. We could choose a template that's an architectural inch unit, or we could choose these different millimeter drawings. But we're going to use the templates that we have in D2L just to make it work a little bit smoother. And so this is the same information I just talked about with drawing templates, and where I showed if you start a new drawing, it goes to the template default directory. And then we look at some of these basic units, limits, snap grid, LT scale, dim scale, text and hatch settings. And we're just going to kind of take a look at how those work. We've already looked at units, limits, and then as far as the snap and the grid, we went through drafting settings. LT scale will set the line type scaling when we're in different drawings. And so when we're in a different drawing, like in our mechanical drawing here, and we're working in model space, I'm going to turn off my grid, make it a little easier to see. We use these different layers. And so if I'm on the hidden line layer and I draw a line, and then I look at that line, this is what LT scale controls. It controls the spacing of the hidden lines. Same thing with the center lines. If I draw a line on the center line layer, then according to these architectural drafting standards or mechanical drafting standards, it should be a long line with a short dash, long line, and short dash. And you can get that information if you Google alphabet of lines and take a look at that information as far as what these different line types mean and how they work. But if I were to change the LT scale and I changed it to 1, you'll notice that the line types are now spaced differently. If I hit the enter key, it returns me to the last command. If I change it back to 0.5, that's how that setting works. And so as we work with these different drawing settings, that's basically what we're going for in this chapter. When we look at the drawing setup, here we're looking at the units. And so right here, if we were to go in here and just type in units, this is a decimal unit drawing. We can have our ability to change it to architectural, engineering, fractional, and scientific. We're going to leave it in decimal. And then as we go through and look at the way angles are measured, we can look at measuring those angles in decimal degrees, degrees, minutes, and seconds, gradients, radians, and surveyor units. This is just the flip screen. If I hit the F2 key, it shows what commands I have previously run, and that's what they're showing right here. And so if you're wondering what commands you have input, you can type F2 or just hit the F2 key rather, and it'll give you the flip screen that shows, oh, he used the units, and then he turned the snap off at some point. If I hit escape, it goes away. And so here, as we look at the different units, which we talked about, here's our scientific, decimal, engineering, architectural, and fractional units. And then these are the angles in the direction that those units are measured in. So if I go back here to units, and we look at the way the settings are set, the direction for precision, well, this would be the precision, but as we look at the angle in the units, and I'm not sure why I can't quite get to this, but as far as the units go, 90 degrees would be considered north, or at 12 o'clock. 180 degrees would be west. 270 would be south. And then 0 and 360 would be east. And I see it now. It's the direction command right here. So you can use the keyboard to input the units. Like I said, we have the title blocks already set up for you. So if you're doing a mechanical drawing, use the mechanical title block. If you're creating an architectural drawing, then we'll set those units up in the architectural drawing. Here's our limits. And as we work with our limits and our grid and our snap, our grid will go into the area of our limits in model space. And so again, if I go to limits, lower left-hand corner, I always set it up at 0, 0, which would be at the origin of the user coordinate system. And then if I right-click, and let's say I wanted to make this 20 feet, 20 apostrophe, comma, 20 apostrophe, that would be the upper right-hand corner of the grid. And if I hover over that area, we can see that in our units as far as to where that coordinate measurement would be. And so if I were to draw a line from right here, and we look at this coordinate, it's 20 feet X, 20 feet Y. Alrighty, snap, you can just hit the F9 key, or you can type in snap. And this one is set up at 6 inches for the snap increment. If you hit the down arrow key, we can turn it on, we can turn it off. We really aren't going to work with a lot of different things other than using the snap and setting up the grid, the snap increment level. A lot of times I'll turn it off because it gets in the way when you have a measurement that may be less than 6 inches. All right, and so a little bit more about snap styles. Like I say, we really don't do too much with these aspects. Here's our grid. When we turn on our grid, you can see a grid pattern. It gives you an idea of scale. How many times have you gone into a room and wondered how big it is? And then if you look at the ceiling and you know that the ceiling tiles are 2 feet by 2 feet, you can go and count the grid ceiling tiles and get an idea of the room size. Same concept. And we don't really, like I say, change many of the aspects. Sometimes we'll use an isometric grid, but for the most part, we just have that set. When we work with layouts and printing, what we're working with is this tab right here. This is what's called a layout. And as we work with these different layouts, what we want to be able to do is to double click in the viewport, and we want to be able to set up the scale. And so if I unlock this, when it's locked, the whole title block moves. When the viewport is unlocked, then the geometry moves. And that's why we lock it, because you change the scale if it's not locked. And so the way that we work with these setting the scale options is we double click in the viewport, and then we go to the scale, and then we can set it. Typically I'll start with an architectural scale of like 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, and then I'll try to use the title block to the best ability to fill up the drawing space. And so, yeah, I could measure this if I plotted it at scale, but it's way too small. And so if I bump this up to the next scale, 1/2 inch equals a foot, and I bring that in, it almost fits. So I'm going to go down one more. And so I'll go with 3/8 of an inch, not the ideal scale, but yet it's measurable when we work with these title blocks. And then I'll lock it. And so I'll say, okay, once I have the title block set, I go here to the little blue lock, and when it's locked, now that's locked in at 3/8 of an inch equals a foot. I'll double click outside of the title block, and then I'll update the drawing to let the people in facilities know that if they're going to measure this and see if my furniture fits in the conference room here, whether it's going to go through the door or not, they can measure that from a plotted drawing. So here's a viewport. Again, if we were to start just a plain drawing like this one here, where I just started a new drawing from a template, it would start off in model space, and then we go into layout mode. Whatever I draw in model space, if it's a circle, it'll be reflected in layout mode. Now, you might say, well, where is it? If I double click in the viewport, you have to look for it. It's almost like a camera view. If I go back to model space and I update this by maybe putting another circle here, if I put on O snap, it'll remember the last size, and so I'll just hit enter for that, and then I can go and make some geometry. If I go back to layout, you'll see that that's set. And then if I go and set up the scale for that, I can set that up at 50% scale, and then when I print that, it's set up at 50% scale. So that's how it looks from out of the box, plain vanilla AutoCAD. Again, we have these mechanical and architectural title blocks set so that you can just click in the viewport and then set and lock the scale. If I'm on a mechanical print, same thing. Let's erase these. Double click in the viewport, and this is set up at a scale of 1:1. And so if I were to print this drawing out, it would be the exact size of the part that I'm creating. And so that's how we would set up scales in layouts using viewports. Printing and plotting. If I double click outside of the viewport, that's the best way to plot these. And then if I go to File, Plot, we'll just say continue. It does allow you to print like books. And so as you have more layout tabs, it's automated. And so you create these drawings like we did in the plates title blocks, where we can then print out all of the prints, and then they can release them down to the shop for manufacture. And then they have like a print book that tells them what to make. I'm just going to continue in the plot command. And then plots are sensitive to the printer. And so if I go to this printer and I set this up for a AutoCAD PDF printer, it's kind of the most generic. And so if I say I want a high quality PDF, B-size paper would be 11 inches in the x-axis and 17 inches in the y-axis. And that's a portrait orientation. I'm not sure why I've got it that way. Let's see if I can go 17, 11. And so here we have a 1711 ANSIB. And then we want to set this up as extents, and then we want to preview that. And that would be what the preview of my drawing plot would look like. It will have an AutoCAD mark since I'm using the student version, so be careful with that if you bring home something from work. And then I can right click and I can say exit, look at my other plot settings. And so we have the ability to plot from layout. Typically I'll leave it set up like this at full scale, and then you can apply it to the layout and then it'll remember it. And then if I want to preview this, I can preview it. And then if I right click and say plot, it will generate a plot file that's going to create a PDF. And so if I go and I put this in my Toshiba directory, this would be my lab number 2, and it gives a little too much information here, so I typically back it up. Lab 2, and I would save it. And then it creates the PDF of that drawing. And PDFs are a great way to share information without giving away all your engineering work. All right, continuing. So as we take a look at how to create a plot, that would be basic settings for creating a plot from layout. And that completes this chapter review for basic AutoCAD drawing setup.